What is up, everybody? I hope you are enjoying this episode of my man Adam Schell, and I wanted to take a second while I have your ear to let you know that next Thursday, October 17th from 7 to 9:30 p.m. EST, Breathe with Cannabis is back, and this month's theme is amazing. This month's theme is the Relationship Healing Edition. So whether or not you're having challenges in how you relate to yourself, your romantic partner, friendships, cannabis, anything in life, this workshop is going to be an amazing opportunity to come allow yourself to usher in your next level of evolution when it comes to your relationships, alongside our worldwide community of spiritual seekers just like you. So to find out more about the event and register, head down to the show notes for this episode, and I will see you all there. Now back to the show. Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. Every once in a while in my life, I meet someone who, as soon as I meet, I wonder how in the hell I ever lived my life without them in it. Typically, these people are people that I feel an instant connection with, and who, along with many other facets, really spark my curiosity, my inspiration, and my spiritual buttons in ways which open me up to new possibilities in life. Today's guest on the show fits that bill to a T, and is a returning guest to the show. From an extensive background on the top of his class on Wall Street, to realizing just how out of alignment he was in that role, to then leaving everything he knew behind to usher in the next level of his evolution as a holistic health and spiritual coach who is trained with some of the world's best mentors and teachers in those realms. It's safe to say that he's gained a lot of wisdom as a result of the life he has lived. In today's episode, we went completely with the flow and had an incredible conversation that spanned many topics, and our ultimate intention was to allow spirit to guide us wherever it wanted us to go. So get your curiosity caps ready and help me as I welcome my dear brother Jason Pickard back onto the show. Jason Pickard, my man, we're back at it again. The last time we did this, we were in your Maloka at your personal house. It was epic. I don't know if anything can top that. Well, we're going to try today. We're going to try. And as I said in the intro to everyone listening in, you know, Jason's such a good buddy of mine I got connected to through Paul Check. You guys have probably heard him on my show before. And any chance we have the opportunity to dive back in, I take that opportunity. You know, there's almost no one in the world that I can dialogue with in a way where we just let the divine take it wherever it's going to take it. And so, you know, again, that's the whole point of today's episode. We have no idea where this is going to go, what's going to come out. And that's the perfect juxtaposition to be in for a really solid dialoguing session. So how you doing today, Jason? Amazing.
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you so much. It's such an honor. And I don't know how many times I've been on one of your shows, at least probably 4 or 5, but it always feels like the first time. I'm super excited. And I can attest that there is no plan today. I said, hey, do you want to have any talking points? And you said, nope, let's just roll. So, you know, if we're a little bit all over the place, excuse us because we're just shooting from the hip today.
Yeah, man. And dude, you know what's funny is like, the episodes that I do less for always end up my favorite. And that's what I started really getting recently is that I think that based on what all you guys who are listening in comment to me and everything, you like real conversations, you know, like no necessarily like a plan. I mean, I have a certain direction of what we can go in today, but you know, I actually like the less planning when it comes to conversating because true conversation is off the cuff. It is dialogue, right? I mean, you know, you look at Paul, for instance, right? Like when you go to a workshop with Paul, he doesn't go over any of that beforehand. He's just shooting from the hip for 10 hours plus at a time. And the stuff that comes out is pure magic. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, let's think about that for a second, because, you know, the left brain logical way of thinking, like of us sitting here and analyzing what we think we should do, is only about 2% of the available information. The right brain, the being in the now, the being in the flow, the being connected to the universe, all of the things that we can't possibly see, even if we sat here and tried to figure it out, is 98% of the information. So while a little bit of that left brain is important, the 2% of a little bit of preparation, it's almost naive to think that we could actually plan and do a better job than opening ourselves up to the unknown, right? And just think about it logically. When you're driving your car, you can control about how fast you go, right? If it's 55, you can control if you're going 54, 62. But after that, if you go over the speed limit, you can't control if you're going to get pulled over. You don't know if there's a cop waiting around the bend when you pull around it that you can't see. And then if there is a cop there, you don't know if he or she's going to pull you over. And then if he or she's going to pull you over, you don't know if you're going to get a ticket. Then if you get a ticket and you decide to go to court, you don't know what the judge is going to do. So while we can plan, while there is a little bit of a roadmap and we can sort of choose which way we go, we ultimately have to realize in life that there is so much more that we can't plan. And the reality is like, not only is it true, but when we open up to the mystery and realize there's more for us in not planning, we can access something deeper. And that's what I'm hoping that we're getting into today. And I think that's why it's actually intelligent in some ways to plan and not to plan.
Yeah, dude, perfectly spoken. One of the things that, I found in life is that my happiness and joy, my fulfillment in life is directly attached to how much mystery I have in my life. And that was something that came through as an idea, during a cannabis ceremony, I think last year. I probably mentioned it on the show before, but that kind of whole idea of like, if you were someone who celebrated Christmas or insert holiday here, birthday here, whatever, what was the best part of that holiday? Was it opening the gifts? Was it playing with them? I think neither. I think it was actually coming downstairs, right? Let's say on Christmas morning, knowing there were gifts under the tree with your name on them, but not yet knowing what was in those gifts, and resting in that Goldilocks zone of knowing there was a mystery to be solved, but not having the mystery solved yet, but knowing you can solve it. Like being able to rest in that area, that's my ultimate intention for life these days is, can I be centered enough to know that there are great things coming or just things coming, right? And also be okay with where I'm at right now. Because I think a lot of the time, at least for me, and I imagine for people listening too, I would look forward for my happiness. Oh, when I have this, then I'll be happy. And we know that's a huge thirst trap, because when you get the thing, there'll be a next thing, right? And so realizing like, okay, it's all well and good to look forward to the future of like, oh, I'm really excited for good things to come. I'm really excited to open my Christmas presents. But can I be happy sitting on the couch right now with my dad waiting for my mom to get up so we can open my gifts, right? Which was my my personal story of Christmas, Every year it was waiting for my mom to get up so we could open presents because she sleeps really late, So, again, if we can rest ourselves in that area, I think that's where truly the magic, at least as I've found, comes alive in life.
Well, it's so interesting you say that because, I'm into words and the word happy is interesting because happy comes from happenstance. And happenstance means to be lucky. And so the reality is that, happy moments are in some ways lucky, in that in some ways, sometimes we can be happy. And then we know based on polarity, being in this world, this earth that we live in, that if there's happiness, there must be sadness. So are we supposed to feel good only half of the time, knowing that half of the moments will be happy and half the moments will be sad based on the law of polarity? Or is there something deeper? And what I think is deeper is what they call shanti in yoga. You ever heard Om, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti? Well, what does Shanti mean? Shanti means equilibrium. Shanti is when the right hand and the left hand come together and you find that kind of like peace, but even deeper than peace, contentment, equilibrium, equipoise. And what's interesting about that is that that's a state that actually can transcend both happiness and sadness. So we realize in a life that we appreciate the happy moments, but then even in the sad moments, we can find contentment knowing that these painful moments, these sad moments, are ultimately the ones that bring us the most joy later down the road. If we look back at our life, the things that helped us grow the most, the things that helped us become who we are actually more likely to be the challenges and the painful moments. So how do we be content? How do we be equipoised? How do we be shanti or at peace in whatever comes our way? And to me, that is really the definition of being a yogi. And that's the definition of being abundant, is that no matter what happens in my life, I know this is leading me to a bigger purpose. And a lot of that is opening to the mystery that you're speaking of. The mystery is so fascinating because when we open up to the mystery, we realize that there's more unknown than there is known. And that's cool. And that actually brings imagination and creativity and lets us use our intuition. And it lets us use our curiosity. And our curiosity then becomes our cure. When we're curious, we can access more information. We can be curious about a partner. That gives us empathy. That gives us compassion. We can be curious about a business solution. That gives us new ways of thinking of things. And the whole thing is based on curiosity. Think about a child. What does a child love to play? Hide and go seek. Well, when you play hide and go seek with your life, when you realize that God's favorite game is hide and go seek, everywhere you look, there's the divine hiding, and it's you seeking, right? And it's the same thing. If I hold my hand open like this, you're like, all right, that's just an open hand. But as soon as I close my hand, you're like, oh, what's inside that? What's inside that? I want to know what's inside that. Well, what if you realize that all of life is like that closed hand and it has an opportunity for you to be curious about what's inside? Mm. And when you open to that, you find that Shanti in whatever you do, in my experience.
Yeah, dude, 100%, and, there was something that came through for me there too, which is the whole idea of like, that idea that God's playing hide and seek, or that life in general is just hide and seek. And I got a very similar idea, which was that, life is just one big game of warmer, colder. Now, as a kid, I used to play that all the time, right? You'd hide something in the room like a vaporizer, right? That wouldn't be what you hit at 6 years old, but let's just go with it.
That'd be a little trouble.
I know. So you hide a vaporizer, let's say, and then your buddy comes in and tries to find it and has no idea where it might be. But, based on where he or she is going, you'll tell them they're getting warmer or colder. And I really think that's what life truly is, Yeah. And I think that's why we hear like, why do we hear laughter is the best medicine, right? Why do we hear all these things about kids reminding us of God, right? Like all these things are speaking to something. And I don't pretend to know the answer, but an answer that I've found for that is that life can be play, right? But like if you really look at a child, they're not rummaging to go find healing. They're just simply existing. And when a challenging emotion arises, they usually haven't learned yet, if they're below 6 years old, that certain emotions are desirable and undesirable. So they don't know to block it. They just let it happen. And then they go back to their innate state of being as joy. And then, at the same time, they're able to play and have fun, which I think a lot of adults forget as we get older. One of my favorite things to do at retreats, we were just talking about your upcoming retreat. And, one of my favorite things to do at retreats, especially for men, because I think a lot of times when men come to a retreat, and they think about healing and all of this stuff, it can get very heavy, it can get very serious. And, I'm not here to say that's good or bad, but what I found is that it makes it very challenging to heal, because you're almost like you're on the defense. You're like, all right, something hard's about to happen, like, let me heal through this. Versus like what would happen if you give 20 guys Nerf guns and you connect with a little bit of cannabis beforehand, and you have them running around like little kids, laughing so hard, harder than they've laughed in years. And then potentially they just feel amazing after. Potentially that laughter leads to a cry, right? Or leads to some other type of emotion popping up. For me, like, I really think that when you focus on playing, all the rest will become clear to you. Because even kids, right? They'll be playing, and then all of a sudden someone takes something from them and they have their emotional release.
Yeah.
So like, a big download I've gotten is like, where am I being overly serious in my life when it comes to just, let's say, healing for sake of example, and where can I play more? And as a result, open up more to that infinite mystery that you're speaking of so eloquently, being able to open up, like, I don't know what's going to happen when I go play. And that's the best part of it. Because I think as adults, like, there are parts of our lives that do need to be structured, right? Like if, Kara is going to go drop the kids off and she's going to talk to you about, when you're going to pick them up, you can't just be like, I don't know, sometime, there needs to be some structure there, right? When you're on calls for your clients, you can't be like, I'll show up around 1, there's got to be some structure. So naturally, we have to off-put that with something that can equalize that equation. And for me, that answer is play. Like I spend a lot of my life structured, and then in between there, I just let myself go wild.
Yeah, you said a lot of great points there. I mean, one thing that I wanted to point out is that warmer and colder game.
Yeah.
The interesting question is, what is the compass for warmer and colder?
Yeah.
And for me, the compass is the heart.
Mm.
The mind will tell you warmer or colder and usually put you more towards that structure and more towards accomplishment.
Yeah.
But the heart will lead you towards what's more nourishing to your soul and to your true essence. Mm. So, that's a really hard journey we have to take from our head to our heart. We've all heard the kind of the phrase, the longest journey we'll ever take is 12 inches from our head to our heart, but it's very true. I think you can probably agree with that, following the wisdom of the heart is very difficult. But when we can really open up to the heart, it can be our guide for warmer or colder. Mm-hmm. Now, with regards to play, I totally agree with you 100%. The whole idea of the child is so genius. And we forget that even as adults, we need to transcend, but also include what we did along the way. And so if you follow the archetypal kind of methodology of the tarot, you start off with the Fool at card 0, you go to the Magician 1, the Priestess 2, and so forth, all the way to 21, the World. Well, what happens at 21? After 21, you go back to 0 again. So we go through our life. We're born, we're a 0. We move up to a 1. We start being able to, ask for things or say no. And then all of a sudden we move into polarities and we learn about mommy and daddy, and we learn about all these different things as we go along the way. We get to 21 years old. We typically, in a kind of a mainstream world, graduate college. And then what? We're a 0 again. We're out in the world. We're the bottom man or woman on the totem pole. We don't know a thing. We're completely green. We're out now. We're trying to take care of ourselves in the world. We're barely getting by, and we start over. Then we kind of go through 22, 23, 24. We start earning our way up. We start to say we have this figured out. And then we get to 44, which I just turned. And then we're back to 0. And what typically happens is we have a midlife crisis. When we act like a child again, we start buying toys. We want our new, sports
Corvette
car and, the new shiny little object that we wanted when we were a kid. Then we go to 66. And at this point, and all of these have healthy versions of them, but at 66, we're supposed to now be an elder that has the wisdom of an adult, but has the laughter and the smile and the understanding and the play of a child. And then we get to 88 and we're literally like children again. A lot of us need to be taken care of and maybe even have our diapers changed if we don't take care of our bodies, and we're still alive at that point. So the whole point is that as we go through these stages, we collect wisdom along the way, but we never forget to have the heart and the playfulness and the curiosity of the child. So then at 44, we don't have to have a midlife crisis because we've been playing along the way. And now we have the wisdom of an adult. We get to 66 and now we could become an elder, but we're the elder that has that big smile on their face, the laughing Buddha that has seen a lot of life and has lived a lot of life and is very content, but is still childlike. So that childlike nature is so important. The thing, though, that makes it even more practical is that actually play is one of the great practices for flow states. Because the interesting thing about flow states is that when you naturally do them in play, they have an afterglow. It's like doing the medicine ceremony that it lasts for like 24, 48 hours after.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is if you just go do something that you completely love, like right before this call, if you went and played the guitar or went for a run or played the drums like I like to do or painted or did anything that you just love to do that you naturally are called to, you realize when you do those things, you lose sense of time. You lose sense of space. You completely like almost get taken over and you're just lost in the event. Well, that's what is a flow state. But the more that you can do that by playing and practicing, you're building the reps to understand what it feels like to be in a flow state. So then when you go back to, let's say, even your work, that now carries over and then you're in a flow state in your work. And that has a lot of scientifically proven benefits like improved memory, improved creativity, improved intuition, better health, better recall of patterns, and many other things that, are well documented.
What is up, family? I wanted to take a second while you're tuning in to tell you about an amazing new product I recently began using. Now, you guys know I do ads very rarely, and my promise to you is that anything I speak about is something I personally have found value in using regularly. Well, recently, I came across a company called Brain Supreme, who sells microdoses of mushrooms mixed with adaptogens, nootropics, and other additions as well. And even though I've microdosed off and on for years, I have never felt results like these. In only 2 weeks, I'm sleeping better, I have far less mind chatter, my ability to perform has exponentially improved, and best of all, the sense of inner peace I've been feeling is like nothing I've ever experienced in microdosing before. Right now, you can get 15% off of any of their products when you use code SPRAGUE15 at checkout. And to find out more about them and grab some for yourself, Head down to the show notes for this episode and begin your journey into microdosing today. Now back to the show. Dude, 100%. I had never heard the tarot broken down like that, but it makes so much sense, because at the end of the day, I think a lot of us look at these systems, or put it this way, I think for a long time I looked at systems like that and I'm like, oh, cool, tarot cards, sweet. I'll do my daily pull and awesome, right? But there's a whole system there meant to really illuminate for us what we've forgotten, right? And allow us to remember. And I've also said that, life is just a big series of remembering and forgetting. And so it's really amazing to have these types of systems there to be able to remind us of what we've forgotten about. And one of the things that, I've been really big on too, that I'd love to bounce off you, is I recently read this book. I've talked about it probably on like 7 podcasts already, but it's called Disappearance of the Universe. Have you ever read that book before?
No.
It's a great book, man. It's all based on A Course in Miracles, and it's this guy, Gary Renard, and talk about like the exact depiction of what we're talking about here, like a very deep spiritual book. But it has so much wise guy back and forth in it, so much laughter, so much joking, so much hilarity. It's such an easy book to read because of that, especially for most people. Like, if you try to read a lot of spiritual texts, they can be really dense and things like that. But, one of the things they talk about in there is the whole idea that this whole world is a conspiracy theory. And what they mean by that is that the ego is conspiring with all of us. It's just one being, but it looks like there's a lot of us, to allow us to get further and further away from God. And the way it does that is by making us believe the dream is real. And so like when you think about it in that way, the idea I had is like, wow, in a way, if we choose to believe that, we all kind of have dementia in a way, right? Where we'll have these, like, say, medicine experiences or meditations or retreats where we remember the bigger picture. And we're like, oh my goodness, how could I have ever gotten so upset over XYZ event that happened? Look what beauty it led to. Everything is contextualized and able to be seen as perfect, independent of whether or not you originally judged it as good or bad or duality or whatever. And so at the end of the day, right, like the more that we can remind ourselves of that and remind each other, the more that we're able to get out of that kind of like dementia in a way, right, of thinking that like the body's real, the ego's real, all these people out there that are cutting me off in traffic, they're real. All this stuff is like the ego's big game to conspire against us getting back to God, And so like when the book opened that idea, I was like, dude, I got to share that with Jason.
Well, it brings up a couple interesting things for me. One is that the whole premise that you're bringing of this conspiracy, actually, if you understand what the word conspiracy means in its truest form, it actually gives you the answer. Conspiracy is broken down to con spirare, in Latin, spirare. What does spirare mean, and what does con? Spirare means to breathe, and con is with, to breathe together. And so this whole conspiracy that you're pointing to is that we are all here breathing together as one, even though there's an illusion of separation. But this illusion of separation and conditions is absolutely essential, because the only way for unconditional love, the only way for the divine, the wholeness, to know itself and to grow and to evolve is to have the illusion of separateness. And so we don't want to throw away that separateness. We don't want to say it's all one man and just throw away our own individuality and our responsibility, because it's one of these multi-phase logic where it's yes and. Yes, it is one, and yes, there is individual. But this whole idea of conditions, this whole idea of good and evil, this whole idea of differences is absolutely essential so that we can relate to ourselves and that we can ultimately come to remember that we are one. But the only way to remember that we're one is to first know or think that we're not one. It reminds me of this famous kind of biblical story of the prodigal son. So I don't know if you've heard this story. It's sometimes kind of relayed by Jesus as a mystical story, or also kind of symbolic of Cain and Abel in the Bible. And, there's this great story of 2 sons and a father, and they're working the land, and where they're working really hard. And there's the eldest son, and then there's the second son. And the eldest son does everything the father says. He follows the family's religion. He does everything by the book. He's going to take over the family business. He's ultimately going to be the patriarch. And the second son says, I don't want to have anything to do with this. Dad, can I have my inheritance early? I want to take the inheritance and I want to go off and live my own. So the dad complies. He gives him the money. The son goes off to the city. He spends all the money like on gambling and drinking and prostitutes, blows it all, is completely broke, right? Winds up working at a pig farm. And as he's there tending to the pigs, he actually becomes jealous of the pigs because he realizes that the pigs actually have it better than him. They have a better meal than him, and they're getting taken care of, and he's not getting fed very well because he blew all of his money, and nobody's taking care of him. So he's like, oh shit, I better go home to my dad. So he puts his tail between his legs and he's going back home to the family, and he thinks he's going to get completely reamed out. And as his father sees him from across the field, his father throws his hands up in the air and it's like, my son is home. And he yells to his workers, go and find the fattest goat and slaughter the goat. We're going to have an epic feast. So the older son's here looking at it and says like, Dad, like, what the hell? Like, I've been here this whole time busting my ass. He ran off and he spent all the money. And he says, yes, my son was lost, but now he's home. Now he's found. And so what is that really saying? It's like for us to just grow up and do everything by the book, to live in our parents' religion without questioning it, to live in the mainstream without questioning it. That's actually not as rewarding as the conditions that are set up to forget, to go out into the world, to spend our money, to make mistakes, but to find our own way. And if we find our own way and then we come back home, come back to the one, that's when God is celebrating, because we're there on our own volition, using our own free will and not doing it based out of belief or based out of fear or because we think that's the only way.
Yeah, dude. What's so funny too is that story is such a good analogy to something else they talk about in Disappearance, which like their whole theory and, what the Ascended Masters that come to visit him are kind of talking about is that, the son of God, and this could easily be the daughter of God too, but we'll just say son for sake of conversation. But, God's up there doing his thing. And the son of God has this thought, like, what if there was something else other than God? And in that moment, this reality is created, right? And, deep in the unconscious of all these separate beings, right? Separate beings here, me, you, etc., that are all one being, but playing out this dream of separation. Deep in our subconscious or unconscious, we have this feeling of like, oh my God, our dad kind of hates us, right? Just like in that story, right? The guy was like, oh, man, my family's not going to accept me back, right? Like, what am I going to do? But what does he see when he comes back? His dad's like, dude, I'm ready for you, bro. I knew all that. Like, I knew what you had to go do, and I was fine with it. I never had any, like, inkling of hatred towards you or distaste or anything like that. And I think that's really a microcosm of the macrocosm journey we're going on, right? I think for me anyway, and I imagine for you, it's pretty similar. For me, when I was growing up, I didn't resonate with the idea of religion. My parents didn't push it on me. I always knew that God was real in some sense. Like deep in my core, I was a goth kid, right? So if I was going to be an atheist, my time had passed, right? Even when I was a goth kid, right? Like I knew it wasn't cool to say you believed in God, but I would never say I was an atheist. I would say I was agnostic, And I remember thinking about that when I was a kid and wondering, like, I wonder why I feel like that. Because I was really bullish, to use a crypto term, on like, no, I know that some amount of God is real, but I don't think it's what the churches are saying. And I didn't have a lot of experience in reading the books or anything. It was just an intuitive feeling.
I think that's quite an important part that I'm realizing myself in my own life is that some part of us has to reject it to then find it on our own.
Yeah.
Ultimately, for me, I did grow up in a religious household, and it's quite funny because like a lot of the things that I've rejected, I'm now coming back to and appreciating. I'm appreciating those initiations and I'm appreciating a lot more of those stories, but I'm kind of doing it on my own terms. The things that I didn't resonate with, growing up Jewish and going to temple is that why aren't people smiling? Yeah, why aren't people dancing? Yeah. Why aren't people laughing? Why isn't there more beautiful art? And why isn't there more, just overall joy? And so I left to find that. And ultimately I did. And now I find that I can actually bring it back to those lineages and understand it on a deeper mystical level and understand the parts of it and how they resonate to me and bring that. That's what I found being on my own journey and spending my inheritance, so to speak, out there in the world. And now I can come home and celebrate it that I found it, I found my own inner elixir and I found my own way and now bring it back and share it. So I think that's a normal phase is, there's a part of separation on the hero's journey and rejection that we must go through because that's part of the individuation process. But ultimately on the hero's journey, the hero comes back home. But they come back home when they find out new information. They find out themselves. They find that inner elixir or the sword and the stone. Then they come back to share it and to elevate the original group that they left.
Yeah, 100%, dude. And I was just going to bring up the hero's journey when you were talking about it. There's that refusal of the call, right? Almost like, no, I'm not going to do what they're telling me I need to do. And, you're right. It's that individuation process. And what do you realize, or at least what have I realized? I imagine you'll agree with this. When I was a kid and I saw religion, my unconscious belief was like, that should make me happy. And that doesn't really look like it's going to make me happy. What I didn't understand at that point, and I'm not saying the church has this right or wrong or whatever, but what I didn't understand as an individual at that point is that my happiness can't be focused on out there. It has to be from in here. And so a lot of like what I've discovered on my time of going out and, spending my inheritance or whatever is how to find happiness within. And now that I've found that, I can realize what people love about religion, regardless of what religion it is, whether it's Islam, Christianity, Judaism, the flying spaghetti monster, whatever it is, right? It doesn't really matter as long as that's making you feel warmer to what? Who knows, really? We could say oneness, we could say God, but I don't really care to know what that answer is, honestly, because that's what keeps the mystery going. Like, I think that if we choose to believe we're infinite beings and we've been there, wherever there is, forever, right, for eternity, then why are we so excited to get back there when we have like this moment in time down here of playing out this illusion in which we're separate beings, in which we have a finite, birth and death and all of these things? Yeah, life can be challenging, of course, but at the end of the day, when you start remembering through whatever, way you get to remember is, like, when you start remembering, you start to actually have fun with this process. And the analogy that comes to me is kind of like this, right? So you're a dad. I'm not, but I can imagine anyway. That like if your child comes out and they're about 4 years old and they're like, Dad, there's a boogeyman under the bed, right? There's two ways you can handle that as an adult. You can do it the wrong way or the right way, right? I'm going to bring duality into it. The wrong way is to get short with your kid and be like, dude, there's no fucking boogeyman under there, right? They don't fucking exist, right? The right way, on the other hand, is to actually play that out with the child, right? Now, in the first way, when you just tell them like, shut up, you're wrong, you're not really allowing them to individuate in that way, right? You're kind of like pushing your reality on them. But when you actually play it out, like, okay, you said he's under a bed. Where is he? All right, I'm going to show you there's nothing under there, right? You allow that child to have their natural process, right? And like, how many times throughout life do we think there's a metaphorical boogeyman, right? Whether it's the tax man, whether it's China or Russia or whatever, right? Like, we're all dealing with our own individual boogeymen. And I think a lot of times what happens is we try to just like, shut up, it's not real, right? But at the same time, like we get to go through that process and figure it out, because as we start to figure out what the boogeymen are and that we don't need to be afraid of them, whatever that boogeyman is or whoever they are, there's a process of not only individual, I mean, I guess you could call it individuation, but within the individuation, there's a process of gaining more self-confidence, more self-esteem, more faith that even if the boogeyman gets you, you're going to be okay, right? And so it's interesting how these analogies can really speak to so many different aspects of life, especially when it comes to childhood, to bring it all back circle.
It's interesting about the kids because like in that situation, like, what you said is definitely true. I mean, the last thing you want to do is say, oh, you're not seeing that, you're just making that up or whatever, because I've heard so many stories of kids that have like incredible abilities to see things and have special powers, and the parents come in and they squash them. And unfortunately, that's creates a crisis later in life when you repress that ability. So many kids have the abilities to like, remember past lives and to bend spoons and to do all sorts of interesting things that we think is like, not possible when we get into our adult brain. And most of us are told along the way by society that that's not like, okay. So we kind of limit those abilities and suppress them. But the interesting thing about the boogeyman that came up for me is like, the kids are so much more perceptive than we are. And especially as a young kid, for all I know, we should take it very seriously.
Yeah.
Get out a bundle of sage and sage under the bed, or say a blessing or a prayer for the boogeyman, because they may be perceiving something that actually we can't perceive. There may be actually some truth to it. But the interesting thing, like on a psychological perspective of the boogeyman that you were alluding to, is that like, how do we make our boogeyman our ally? Because whatever we're afraid of is actually, or whatever disturbs us is actually some kind of projection of our subconscious that we need to take a look at. if we're against Kamala Harris or we're against Trump or Putin or any of these figures, we have to really take a deep look about what actually is it that disturbs us about them. Where are we sort of like them? Even in a 1% dose, can we find a way that we're a little bit Kamala-like or we're a little bit Trump-like? And the tricky one is actually this kind of energy that they're portraying that's disturbing us. Maybe it's like a self-centeredness, we could say, or a power that we don't like. Where do we need a little bit more of that? Where do we need to be self-centered a little bit more? Maybe we're giving all of our energy away to our work or to our family or something. We need a little bit more time for ourselves. So when we look at the boogeyman as an actually like a shadow ally, an ally towards wholeness, where we could say, oh, this thing that we're afraid of, this is actually the medicine that we need. If we can just stop and take a look at it, realizing that everything in the outside world, especially things that we're afraid of or that piss us off or disturb us, are a projection of a quality inside of ourselves that we haven't come to grips with. And in that way, the boogeyman could be our spiritual teacher that brings us to wholeness.
Yeah, dude, 100%. I'll bring out Star Wars again. I bring this up in a lot of episodes, but it's worth it. Would Luke Skywalker have ever become Luke Skywalker without Darth Vader? And also, what was Darth Vader? Not just his father, right? Sorry, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen Star Wars. But, again, like...
enough time has gone by.
Exactly. Enough time has passed, all right? We're making that judgment call. But again, like, Luke had to discover the parts of him that were very similar to Darth Vader for him to actually beat him. Because, again, and, in life, this usually won't end up in actual physical altercation, like with Kamala or Trump or whatever. But, like, in order to defeat Darth Vader, which is in order to find peace amongst Trump or Kamala and all the circus show that's going on, we get to figure out what information they have for us that can help us heal that unconscious part of ourselves that is triggered by them. And again, like if we think about oneness as the goal, right? I'm going to use it in quotations because it could easily not be the goal for some people. But for me, oneness or, getting closer to God is always my goal. And so in the scope of that, we must get rid of distortions, right? Or move through distortions, transmute them, transcend them, whatever language you want to use there. But any of those distortions, like a perfect example of a distortion is when you look out there and you go, that person's to blame. I don't like what they're doing. Instead of going, also, what about me is like that? And why am I putting the focus out there? And how can I put the focus more on here, right? And me. And this is the real work right here. I mean, this is fucking challenging work. It's funny when you read like A Course in Miracles and they're like, there's only one thing you got to do, just forgiveness. And you're like, oh, forgiveness? No meditating, no breath work, no anything? Piece of cake, right? And then you realize...
I 100% agree. I 100% agree.
And like you realize that there are infinite opportunities every day to forgive. And it's also, in my opinion anyway, the hardest work I've done. Realizing like actually doing what we're doing right now. Like when I get triggered over something I see in the circus show, actually wondering like, fuck, where is that in me? What do I need to forgive in myself? Oh, dude, does that sting? But it's real good stuff.
There's so many things you say there that I think are so important. I mean, if this is just like the one soundbite, I think maybe we'll get it here. But, we forget that Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching says something very important. He says the government reflects the people, meaning our elected officials, or even the ones that are not elected, that are just kind of put in place, are a reflection of us. They reflect us. They're either people that we voted for, or that half of the country voted for, or by giving up our own authority and agency to make better choices and to reclaim our power, we have allowed these people to be in charge. And so who's ever on the stage, whoever has the microphone, is in some way, maybe even just 1%, but is in some way a reflection of us and an opportunity to be a big mirror for our own internal work. It really is true. Now, the thing about forgiveness is so important. I was teaching my students recently and they all want to know, like, what's the best mantra? What's the best thing I can do to raise my vibration? And I broke it down to 3 things that I learned from my very good buddy, Yahuma, an amazing medicine man and friend. And essentially, the number one mantra I give them is thank you. Like I've learned like 30 or 40 different, maybe 100 different, yogic mantras. And at the end of the day, the one that is actually the most important, the most valuable, is just saying thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the boogeyman. Thank you to myself. Thank you to my partner. Thank you to my enemy for showing me what my triggers are, for showing me where I need to grow. Thank you to the teacher. Thank you to the anti-teacher, the one who shows me through the negative path. And the ultimate spiritual act you can do is forgiveness. And the most important person we need to forgive is ourselves. We cannot forgive somebody else until we forgive ourselves. Why is forgiveness so important? Because if we don't forgive ourselves, we're living in the past and we're looping over and over again. So in order to move into the present moment, to be able to move towards mastery or excellence in action, as Dr. Karim says, or the limits of perfection in our own life, we must forgive. We forgive ourselves and then forgive others. And how do we know when we've actually forgive somebody or forgived ourselves? We experience gratitude. We experience gratitude. And forgiveness thoughts, it begins with thoughts. I forgive, I forgive, I forgive you. But that only takes so far. Thinking in our head, I forgive ourselves. And then we have to actually say the words out loud. Ryan, I forgive you. But then we actually have to show up in actions where we show up in the moment as if you're a completely new person, as if I've never met you and given you a complete opportunity to be a different human being right now. And the same for ourselves. So it's divine thoughts, divine words, and divine actions.
Yeah.
And so it's gratitude and forgiveness. And those are really the core. You could take the Course in Miracles, which is an amazing book. You could take any of these spiritual books or any of these scriptures, and you can throw them in the trash. If you just remember to practice gratitude, forgiveness, maybe an optimistic outlook on life, protecting your body, protecting your loved ones, and protecting the earth. Some of the most spiritual acts I've done myself in the last 6 to 12 months is having a practice of picking up trash. It sounds like, not very super like mystical, like medicine ceremonies and scriptures and meditations and altered states. And, you got a float tank downstairs and you have all these things. Literally going outside and picking up trash. The experience that I get internally and what I see happen in my life when I pick up a piece of trash that wasn't mine is so magnificent. The laws of nature are inherently abundant. The laws of nature inherently have life force in them. And when you protect nature, you become in alignment with that life force and you become a living vessel of life force. You become a living vessel of abundance. These are the really simple principles: gratitude, forgiveness, protecting your body, protecting Mother Earth, and protecting loved ones. I mean, it's literally that simple. And that's really what I'm working on right now. Every single day I have an opportunity for forgiveness. Kara comes into the room and says something that I take personally. Can I forgive myself? Can I forgive her? Can I be grateful that this criticism of me that hurt or triggered me is actually bringing me to be a better human being? And can I do what I can to take care of myself, my family, and the planet every single day, even when it's not my responsibility, which is sometimes the hardest, knowing that it's all of our responsibility because we are one. And, the last thing I'll say is a very interesting thing of this goal of oneness is that the place where I'm at with that is that it's a yes and. For me, it's simultaneously experiencing the maximum amount of oneness while also experiencing the maximum amount of my own personal individuality.
Dude.
How do I hold both of those at the same time? How do I hold the oneness that we're all one? We're breathing the same air. We're drinking the same water. We have access to the same food. We're living on the same precious blue pearl that's flying through space at unimaginable speeds. And at the same time, realize that I am a unique person. There's one fingerprint. There's one snowflake. That there's never been another chance to know me. And how do I live that to the limits of perfection at the same time holding up all of the principles of good, true, and beautiful and oneness? And that is my life's path. And I think, it probably took 1,000,000 lifetimes to get to this point. I don't know how many more it'll take. Hopefully not that many. The thing that you were saying is so fascinating because I do think when we say we're spiritual, is that what we're really pointing to is that we come from somewhere else.
Mm.
We're here visiting on an epic journey of growth and discovery, but ultimately our home might be somewhere else. But the point is not to just stay here and get lost. And the point is not to just run home like it's that easy. And because who knows what even happens when you get back there? Maybe you have to start over again for all we know. The point is, how do I live with one foot in there and one foot here? How do I stay connected to the spiritual while also connected to the earthly? How do I have one hand in Lucifer and one hand in Ahriman at the same time? And when you achieve that, that's the middle way, and that's the Christ principle. And that's what Christ was awarded. He was not born Jesus Christ. Christ was given to him as a title for the one who could hold the balance between the earthly and the spiritual plane. And that Christ means the same thing that Krishna means in Hindu, means the most charismatic, the most beautiful, the most attractive force, the thing that pulls everything into itself like a black hole, the same as Buddha. So if it's Buddha consciousness, Krishna consciousness, Christ consciousness, it means being able to hold the oneness while also holding the individuality, while being able to hold the fullness of the spirituality, while living all of those divine attributes to the limits of perfection in this earthly plane.
Dude, signed, sealed, delivered, bro. That was spot on. And dude, like, it's so funny because that's really what I've been focused on too, is like this idea of balance, right? Like, you know, even with, I mean, anything in life, right? Like a lot of what I talk about is obviously with cannabis, with this whole idea of like, is something good or bad? I don't know. It's not that simple, right? Like it feels a lot simpler to just say, yes, I'm never going to do it again. Right. But that also makes all of this feel more real, right? If you can never go near alcohol again, if you can never go near these things, first of all, I mean, we won't even talk about the fact that if you can't go near them, you didn't heal whatever brought you to them in the first place. Because if you really healed it, you'd be completely fine with it, right? Like you wouldn't necessarily need to go do it, but you wouldn't need to necessarily do it, you know, every day, right? Like there would be that balance point. And sure. I think that's like the ultimate guiding principle of my life is maybe, right? It's like the Taoist farmer, you know, like, oh, are you really screwed now or are you really lucky? I don't know. And I'm okay staying right in the middle.
Right.
Because if I'm right in the middle, then number one, I'm going to get to be surprised either option, but I'm also not too attached to one and I'm not too attached to the other. And I think that's a lot of what I see in the spiritual realm these days. And I fell into it myself for a little while, is like I was mentioning before, right? Like trying to live as if you're back home, wherever home is, or destination, whatever you want to call it, right now, where it's like, no, you're having an experience right now. Like be in that experience. You know, it's great to remember like, oh, I got a house I can go back to, but also like these woods I'm exploring right now are really cool. And maybe there's some lakes I haven't found before or some animals that I've never seen before that I'm going to go see. And kids get this, right? Like, you know, if you ask a kid like, hey, why do you want to go outside? You know, you already saw that yard. He's like, yeah, but I didn't see it today. You know, like kids get that whole idea of balance. I think as we get adulterated, as we get older, you know, it's not that undoubtedly this is going to happen, but what all too often happens and what happened with me is like, well, I've been out there before. I've seen a sunny day before. You know, we kind of start like lowering our ability to experience because we think we've already got it figured out, you know? And I think that like that's kind of like what people do with spirituality and also being human, right? They kind of go on, let's just say either side, right? Instead of being able to realize that like you can have a yes and here, you know? And you know what? The fact that people do that is also great, right? Maybe that's where they're at in their individuation journey right now. Maybe that's exactly what their soul needs to learn in this lifetime to be able to come back and learn something else in the next lifetime. Maybe for them, that is what's best for them. I have no idea, right? And being able to realize that and humble yourself and know, like, I don't know what the best answer is for anyone. I mean, you're a coach. I'm a coach, right? Like one of the cardinal sins of coaching is thinking you know the answers for your clients. When in reality, the job of a good coach is just to realize they already have all the answers within them. And I'm never going to be able to know the answers better than they can. But what I can do is ask them what is important to them and hold them accountable to that. And if things come up, I can talk to them and ask them questions about it so they can undoubtedly realize their own truth and go, oh my goodness, this is now what matters to me. And you're like, okay, that's what matters. When would you like to have that done by? What would that look like? Right. And so like, you know, again, no matter where we're at in life, I think that's what all of these things are meant to be, whether it be tarot, books, retreats, whatever. They're meant to remind us of both of those truths. Like, yes, you can have oneness and yes, you're also human. And the beautiful part is being right in between. because again, I don't remember what it's like to be fully back there, but I can imagine, based on what sacred texts say, oneness, I imagine, might get boring after a while, right? And I think that when I look at, humanity and everyone, all these, separate beings that are seeming to be here, there was a idea that came to me on an LSD ceremony one time. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you before, but I thought it was hilarious, which is the whole idea of ethereal extreme sporting, which is the whole idea that imagine if you're in oneness and you start to maybe get bored, right? Like that original thought of like, what if there's something else than God, right? We're like, well, what if there's something else than just oneness, right? And then maybe separate beings are coming back and they're being like, whoa, dude, I just tried a microdose of that, and it's pretty wild, and maybe the microdose is like they come down as an ant or a fly, and so like, you're like, I'm just going to say no. I'm just saying no, right? And they start coming back and they keep telling you more things. And you're like, all right, I'll take a microdose. I'll go down as a fly. You go down there and you experience duality and all this shit and you come back and you're like, whoa, dude, that was fucking crazy, right? Well, how often are you going to be able to microdose before you want the next level, And so like, you're going to keep tiptoeing a little bit more. Maybe I'll go down and be a tortoise. I'll be down there for a hot minute, but I'm just going to be kind of chilling in a very meditative state. Well, at the time in which you're ready to be a human being, you are now an ethereal extreme sporter. Like, I mean, having the awareness of like, yes, there's oneness, but yes, we're here right now, seeming to be here. We have all these emotions. We have all this stuff going on. I mean, talk about the most challenging psychedelic experience there possibly is, just being a human just in and of itself. And so I loved that theory that came to me, that idea, because for me, it created a lot of laughter within me to think about, the experience of life being the psychedelic. And that's something I talk about often in the show, but I don't know if I've ever told the actual theory of ethereal extreme sporting whole hypothesis I have, but I'm curious what you think about that, man. If any thoughts come to your mind.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. There's a few things that brings me up. I mean, let's just think about this for a second. All right. Let's just say I could send you on a vacation. How long would it take for you to be on a dark retreat before you started to bug out and want to get out of the cave that you're in? 7 days, 10 days? I mean, there's a limit to that, right? Yeah. At the same time, imagine I sent you to a place where the light was as bright as the sun shining in your face and all you could see is bright white light and that's it. I mean, how long could you really stay there? And like, what if there was this place where there were like refined, beautiful, amazing people that were having this eternal play and dance? It's like, that's to me seems to be like the more attractive vacation to go on. And so I think that it's a paradox, is that we are made of darkness. We are made of emptiness or no thingness, as the Buddhists say. There is oneness as the Dvaita Vedanta concept. There is Advaita Vedanta, which is non-duality. It's non-dual and dual. And so there's duality and non-duality. And Dvaita is dual and Advaita is non-dual. I think I had them backwards. But we have emptiness. We have Dvaita and Advaita, non-dual and dual. And then at some point we can reconcile that it is non-dual, dual, empty, and full, all at the same time. Yeah. And so, a lot of these concepts, I think the trick with this stuff, Ryan, is that it's very difficult to speak about these things. One of the attributes of the 99 names of God in the Sufi Book of Life talks about, when you have had a big experience, let's say you had a really big psychedelic experience. It's like being in the desert with your camel, and all of a sudden you get to a place where you have to go to sleep at night, and it's cold out there in the desert, and you put up your tent. And then you're lying there in your tent, you're all covered up, and the camel pokes his head in and says, "Excuse me, sir, it's really cold out here. Do you mind if I just stick my nose in your tent?" And you're like, "All right, no big deal. Just put your nose in." And then all of a sudden, like 20 minutes later, he wakes you up. "Excuse me, do you mind if I put my whole face in? It's really cold out here." You're like, "All right, no big deal. Just your face." Next thing you know, the entire camel is in the tent, and the tent is now lifted up over the camel, and you're there completely naked in the cold. And so these kinds of experiences, these kinds of understandings are very difficult to talk about. They're very difficult to even experience. But when you experience them, they're very difficult to put in words, which is why in Sanskrit, they say that this whole realm that we're trying to speak about and articulate is actually called achintya, which is beyond the mind. The only way to even get there is through direct experience, through, let's say, mantra, meditation, psychedelic experience, a direct experience of love. And it's not something that you could even come back and try to sloppily put in words, especially in English. It doesn't have as many words for these kinds of things, where in Tibetan Buddhism, in Tibetan language, they have 400 different words for consciousness. Just like the Eskimos have, 12 different words or 16 different words, whatever it is, for different kinds of snow. We have snow here, but if we live in snow all year round, we'll have light snow, heavy snow, the snow that you can roll and pack, the snow that's good for chilling out the fish or whatever it is. And so we don't really even have the language, which is why the greatest mystics have only been able to talk about this through music, art, poetry, Sufi dance. It can only be shown in ways that can almost symbolically point to it without actually saying it outright, because it's not something that can be seen. And so, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna turns to Krishna. Krishna is playing the divine, and Arjuna is playing this warrior, and says, "Krishna, please tell me about karma." And Krishna turns to him and says, "My friend, the intricacies of karma are very difficult to explain." You know what I mean? He's saying, this is so beyond, we're sitting here talking about, okay, we're going to be the tortoise and the hare and these kinds of things. But imagine the algorithm of ChatGPT, how amazing that must be. And then think about the algorithm of the mind of God that is calculating every single thing you've been in resonance, every single cause and effect you've done, every piece of trash you picked up or not picked up, every thought you've had in your head, every action you've taken, every smile or frown you said to anybody, every good or bad deed, or everything for multiple lifetimes. And it's carrying all of this in a queue managed by the planets and all the different millions and billions of people and, different beings and animals and plants and everything on this planet. To sit here and try to talk about it is actually almost silly, because it's so inconceivable. In my methodology, that we are all very courageous for deciding to take this leap into Earth, because this is the playground. This is the school. This is where you can make things happen. And this is the really an amazing place to learn about all of these different things that can't happen in other places, at least as far as I know, in this universe. And so we're all very courageous, but I feel as if once we take that first leap, the laws of cause and effect and karma, or resonance, according to Dr. Karim, are now taking over. And we've sort of started that somersault. And that starts an almost infinite journey until maybe we can transcend this place. And as the Buddhists say, we become bodhisattvas, where we can then have control over our karma and then decide what times we want to come back into to help and to heal and to elevate the rest of the people. But when you were talking about alcohol, it made me, and this whole thing of poetry and these things of beyond the mind, it made me think of a poem by Omar Khayyam, a great Sufi poet. And I wanted to read it because I think it was very interesting about what you said. And he says, this is probably from 1200 or 1200. He was a Sufi polymath, really deep into astronomy and all these things. And poetry was not even his main subject. And he writes amazing poetry. But he says, "If you drink no wine, then mock not those who do, and lay no traps of falsehood to ensnare a few. Take no pride in turning from the wine, for 100 indulgences unseen are thine. Why scorn the drinker for one simple sip, when hidden pleasures pass your eager lip? Judge not the fault of others, you think you have none, for wine is but a servant to sins you've already done." So maybe we'll leave that topic at that for people to chew on, because these kinds of things are, should I drink? Should I not drink? What's the right amount? What's not the right amount? What's good and bad? This boogeyman, all these kind of concepts, I think could be summed up quite well in that poetry.
Yeah, dude, 100%. That's what I loved about A Course in Miracles too, is they talk about the reason you don't judge someone else is because what you hear, whether you want to call it the one mind, whether you want to call it oneness, whatever, is you're just judging yourself. Now, if you forgive someone else who you really keep forgiving, you're also at the same time forgiving yourself, right? And so that's why, be kind. Everyone's facing a battle unseen, right? All these kind of quotes, the golden rule, all this kind of stuff. And that's where I've gotten to. You look at people like Alan Watts, for instance, incredible, and also like this alcohol. You look at Paul, for instance, incredible, loves tobacco. You and I both love tobacco. I love cannabis, right? Are these things good or bad? No, whatsoever. There's no like duality, to me anyway, is not actual reality. It's just the illusion that we're existing within in this level of, reality, I guess I'll put it in quotations. So at the end of the day, is it good or bad? I don't know. Is it good or bad for the individual subjectively? I'm not really sure, right? But, at the end of the day, I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to do whatever feels like it's giving me joy, true joy, because I think there is part of it that you have to figure out. I mean, I imagine for a lot of people, cocaine vendors are still, happy and fun. So you have to kind of discern what is real happiness. But at the same time, like, maybe that's what that person needs to go through in this lifetime.
I mean, for me, I think it comes down to a really simple thing. It's like when I look in the mirror in the morning, can I be honest with myself about how my behaviors and actions are working for me and for others in my life? That's the judge. Am I being a good father? Okay, stare into the mirror for 2 minutes and ask the question. Am I taking care of my body? Am I smoking too little or too much tobacco? Am I drinking too much alcohol? Am I partying too much? Am I working too much? Am I working too little? Ultimately, good and bad or nothing. The reality is you need to become your own judge, and you need to be brutally honest with yourself and look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself the question, is this working for me? Mm-hmm. Is this diet working for me? Do I like the body I see? Can I handle 1 drink a week, 2 drink a week? Never. And be completely honest with yourself, knowing that you are the judge and you are your own truth, and accept full responsibility for what you do and decide what is good and what is bad based on your own experience. And that's what it comes down to. Can you meet your responsibilities? Can you show up to work on time? Is your body healthy? Can you move your body and lift heavy things? Can you play with your kids? Do you have energy? Are you meeting your responsibilities? Are you a good friend? Are you a good son, parent, daughter, etc.? And if you can say yes to those things, then everything is working for you. Go for it. Enjoy it. And you have it in balance. And if you're looking at yourself honestly and you say, you know what? I know my body doesn't look good. I'm waking up tired all the time. I have spots on my face. I'm really angry. I'm lashing out at people. My bills are late. I'm almost about fired from my 3rd job. Then you have to just say, okay, well, what needs to be changed? And you're the judge of yourself. And that's what it comes down to for me is there's really no, good or bad drugs. There's no good or bad foods. There's no good or bad people. It all comes down to what works for you. What makes you feel better? What is raising your vibration? What is giving you energy and love so that you have so much, it pours out into other people? And let that be the judge of all these things.
Yeah, dude, perfectly stated. And that's exactly what I believe to be true for myself. I went through so many diets, so many different things, right? And at the end of the day, maybe that diet works for someone else and they wanted to share with people, and great. Maybe it's a certain step on your journey or a certain, plant medicine, whatever. But at the end of the day, as long as you can smile at yourself in the mirror and feel really good about yourself, everything's going to fall into place, And again, simple, not easy, because it does take like a degree of intuition and a lessening of needing to control and things like that. And also, a lessening of taking in so much information with the idea that someone else is going to have the answers for you. That was where a couple of years ago, I just stopped listening to podcasts, audiobooks, and everything for a good solid like year and a half. And just was like, what happens if I don't take any information in? Who am I if I don't take any information? And it was a really fun experiment, because through that time, I found a lot of things that really worked for me that I would have maybe figured out otherwise, but it wouldn't have been as quick. I can confidently say that, where it comes to what do I want to put in my body? How do I want to treat myself? How often do I want to let loose? Right? Like, as long as I can look at myself in the mirror and feel like, dude, you got this, man. Like, everything's going well. Physical energy is there. Emotions feel pretty balanced. Mindset feels strong. Spiritual growth feels really centered and connected. If those things line up, then I don't really care what anyone has to say about any decisions I'm making. And I'm not going to make any like judgment calls or anything on what anyone else is doing. And for me, there have been certain family members that, again, in my infantileness, thought that they were, just annoying or whatever. But now, having grown up and having more understanding and more wisdom, I've realized, wow, these people had great lessons for me within. Because how many times was I on my health journey early on, looking at what other people in my family, let's say, were doing, and being like, oh, you can't do that. You have to do this instead. Oh my God, that's going to get you sick, etc. When in reality, they were trying to show me like, hey, like maybe I feel like you could make better choices, but it doesn't matter what I feel, because you know what? I don't know. Like, I don't know that. Even if something works for me and it's the healthiest thing you could do, how do I know that's going to be the best thing for that person out there?
100%.
Just putting the attention back on yourself is the only place, right? It's the only answer, as I found,
If somebody comes to you and challenges one of your beliefs in diet, in immunization, in medicine, in psychedelics, whatever, in religion, in God, in oneness, whatever it is, and you feel upset about it, they're actually showing you where you have a lack of conviction.
Yes.
And you need to go deeper into yourself to really know, do I really believe this, or am I just regurgitating this? Because if you are so solid in your faith in the divine, if you are so solid in yourself and your place in the world and your purpose and the exercise, diet, spirituality, love making, relationships, friendships, then it doesn't matter what anyone says. You don't believe, you have a conviction, and nobody else can throw you off. And then you could just say, thank you so much for that reflection, and not take it personally, right? One of the 4 agreements from Miguel Ruiz Sr. is don't take things personally. It's a very important one. And if you do take things personally, he says, it's a reflection of where you lack conviction, where you have a shadow, and someplace you need to work. And then you could be very grateful to them for showing you where your blind spots are and what your next piece of inner work is to work on.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I totally agree with that. And, it's so funny you say that, man, because, I've read the 4 agreements, but I say that often. It's been coming to me a lot over the past year and a half of just like, if you really believe something, then you shouldn't need to have anyone else believe it. Right.
You don't need to tell anybody.
Exactly. You don't need to tell anyone.
Unless they're asking.
Yeah. Unless they're asking and they seem genuinely interested. And if they say, oh, that's cool for you, but I don't think I'm going to do that, you should be excited. Great. Go find what works for you. Like, this is just what works for me. This is by no means an objective good or bad thing. Because again, good and bad is just duality. It doesn't really exist. So yeah, man, 100%. It's just so funny you brought that up, because that's like the mantra going through my head for like a year and a half now.
Well, it's totally true. I mean, it just, it's not even effective. Like, nobody can change another person, right? I mean, we all know this. And so, I used to be 330 pounds when I was in my 20s. I think we've talked about that probably at length, but no matter who came to me, my dad, my mom, so amazing. They're amazing people. They're coming to me and saying like, we really care about you. We really want you to lose weight. We'll do anything we can to support you. It didn't matter. I couldn't do it. It wasn't even like a thought in my mind until I, in myself, said, something's got to go. This is a problem. I'm going to do this. Right. So it doesn't matter how well-intentioned you are. From my own personal experience and, from trying to do this to other people, nobody wants to hear from you. Nobody wants to be woken up out of a dream, right? If you're sleeping at night, it's 3:00 in the morning and I come and I ring your doorbell and you're in the most amazing dream. You're like on the beach somewhere, like floating around. Like, you don't want to be woken up, and nobody wants to be woken up from the dream of their life unless they're asking, hey, Ryan, I see why, you look so happy. You look so healthy. Like, man, I'm really struggling. Can you help me? And then you, as the person that has more experience, actually has to sit with your own heart and discern what is the right amount of information for this person. What is their readiness, their ability, their level of development, their level of evolution? What's going to be too much for them? How do you say it to them in the right way that it connects them? There's a very sophisticated way to then how to give them what they need to help elevate them until they're ready for more. And so, ultimately, if we know in ourselves our own truth, there's no reason to share it, and there's no reason to be knocked off by somebody else who is challenging it. And and if you do, you just, oh, okay, I'm still growing. There's still opportunities for me to find a deeper conviction in myself. And when I start to try to convince you of a certain way, I have to look at myself and saying, well, why am I trying to convince him? Why aren't I okay just believing it on my own? And so all of life becomes this beautiful way to wake us up. every single dream, every single body symptom, every single encounter, every single animal, every single disturber, every single boogeyman, every single song, every dance, every piece of art, all of these things, all of these things are here to awaken us to the truth of ourselves. And
Mm.
so we can lean into them and find more beauty in them and rest that all of the life's experiences we have are all leading us back home.
Yes, dude. Fucking awesome, bro. We'll wrap it there, dude. This has been amazing, bro. I want to make sure I give you an ample opportunity to tell people where they can find you, where they can find out more about the abundance archetype, which we talked about heavily. If you guys haven't heard about that, Jason's epic group that he runs. I got some really good homies in there. I mean, mutual homies of ours. Definitely go back and listen to the other podcasts if you want to deep go through and, whole description of what the abundance archetype is. But where can people find you, man? Where can they reach out and connect with you and gain all of your wisdom, bro? Where can I send people?
It's so, first of all, thank you so much. And, I've always really enjoyed our talks and our friendship. I just really love spending time with you. I really appreciate your depth, your humor, your smile, your vitality, and your openness to exploring. It's just very refreshing. And I really appreciate you. And I appreciate your not only your podcast, but also your Connect with Cannabis and all of your offerings. They're just really important, especially because there's not that many people out in the world who really deeply understand cannabis and how to use it in a mindful and integral and spiritually guided way. So thank you for that work. For me, it's quite simple. The abundance archetype is my baby. I have so many amazing students that I love so much, and they all that enter go on at least a 1-year journey with me into discovering what is true abundance. And we take all of my experience from 20 some odd years on Wall Street at the top of that game, and all of my experience in the spiritual and wellness and psychological and dreaming fields. And I've combined them all into an amazing course that really opens people up to be this abundance in their own life and to find out what that truly means, how to marry spirituality and wealth, well-being, and entrepreneurial success, and have that definition be their own definition. But the most important thing that I love is my community. We're getting ready right now. We're leaving on Friday to go to Mount Shasta for a 5-day retreat where I'm leading the students in an in-depth 5-day ceremony where we're really going to find out what's going on in the inside and the outside. And it's going to be, I'm so excited. I'm packing right now. I'm sending out drums and instruments and all sorts of cool stuff. But my community is what is really most important to me, as I'm sure it is for you and your work. And that anyone who joins my course, they're really joining a community that has a course. We meet 2 times a week. And when we go on those 2 times a week, we bring in amazing guests like yourself, like a Paul Chek. Gosh, I have had probably 75 people in over the last year and a half from all walks of life, from Wall Street to, Father Sean O'Leary and everything in between. And I do probably about half the calls myself where I answer questions and go deep. And all of the students have all of access to that on recording in like our little abundance archetype Netflix. And so the simple way is if you go to jasonpickard.org, you can not only download my free guide to my 8 keys to greater wealth and well-being, which is a pretty extensive guide to how to create abundance in your life today. And that's a free document you can just download. And when you go there and download the document, you have an opportunity to book a free discovery call with me. And you get on a call with me for 30 minutes and we get to wrap and see if you're a good fit for the program. And then if you are, it's full speed ahead. We go on a journey together, you, me, and our amazing community members from all around the world. And it's just so exciting. So thank you so much. I hope to see you on a discovery call. What do you have to lose,
I know, dude. It's so freaking cool. And guys, I can tell you, like I said before, like Jason and I have mutual friends that are both in his community, and I've spoken to them at length about what he does, and they've been absolutely blown away. Tucker, Steve Panico, all these guys that are just absolutely amazing, really high, heavy hitters, in terms of spirituality and just putting their best foot forward, and great community to join. A lot of you guys hit me up all the time. What can I do to find community? What can I do? Well, don't tell me that I didn't give you a really good option here, right? Like, what Jason's doing is absolutely amazing. And dude, I love rapping with you every time, man. I'm so grateful for our friendship. it's so great that we live close together too, because us East Coasters are kind of out here on our own, right? We don't have all the fun stuff that California
holding down the fort
has. Yeah, dude, we're holding down the fort up here. But dude, it's been amazing, man. Thank you so much again for coming on. Guys, I know you enjoyed this episode. Like I said before, Jason is just such an amazing soul brother in my life, doing incredible work. This guy is legitimately a legend. I love working with this guy. And as you can see, he's extremely well-versed in so many different topics, but he's also wise enough to know that it's not his job to figure out the answers for you, right? And to find that in someone is extremely rare. So make sure you go check him out. I'm going to link everything in the show notes. And until next time, wherever you guys are in the world, I hope you're having the best day ever. And as always, may the source be with you. Peace.